So we're to part 4 of the uncomfortable truths of self-defense with Rory Miller. In the first 3 parts, we went over lots of aspects of the self-protection community, dealing, the difference between dealing with women, the idea of what is the difference between a hunter and a fighter, the really big concept of the rhinoceros versus a unicorn. If the stuff is making no sense to you, it means you have not watched the first 3 parts, and I would encourage you to do that. We close out today where Rory and I start talking about kind of the state of the industry, especially when it comes to military and law enforcement, what we're seeing as far as how the bureaucracies are dealing with training and the importance of having the right mentors. And all of this is very key to your self-protection training. A lot of great information as we close this interview out. Now, remember, make sure that if you have not got to surviveviolence.com, given us your email, got our free masterclass, and got on the list to make sure that you have the first look at any new product that we have, at any new subject matter expert, any new live trainings that are available. This is the place to register. That way, we will always be able to keep in touch with you, regardless of platforms. And let you know exactly what's going on and make sure you get the most relevant content the quickest. So please go and do that. Also, please continue to share the channel. And, also please get yourself over to Chiron Training to check out Rory's information. To go to Chiron just for the research books that are there, the library that he put together of recommended reading is worth it alone. But there's a wealth of information over there. He's written many more books than just Meditations on Violence. Facing Violence is another great one. So he's a prolific thinker in the industry. And even if you never get a chance to train with him, getting some of his writings, getting some of his books, seeing some of his approaches to things is absolutely worth it. I'm really, really happy with all the comments that I have coming in from the first 3 parts of this. People are really enjoying this. Again, I think he's a voice that needs to be more heard. So without further ado, let's get into part 4 of the uncomfortable truths of self-defense. Exactly.
Yeah. So
will you still appreciate me?
Yeah.
No, that's really cool. What one thing I'm really kind of interested in, I don't know if you know, my wife's in law enforcement, and she just got promoted to deputy chief out here, but she did a lot of time on the streets and everything, and been involved in a couple of shootings. When I met her originally, she was an academy instructor, and they were bemoaning the fact that they said, we got this generation of kids that literally have never put hands on each other. The good kids, the kids that actually get through to the academy and pass all the background checks. And we're going to be putting them in areas with, groups that's all they've ever done. They're very comfortable putting hands on and stuff. What's your thought process on training, because you've trained both military and law enforcement operators. How have you seen that evolution, and where do you think we are today, with that?
We're in a mess. I've been hearing the thing about the hiring since the 90s, but basically, bureaucracies want SMART goals. They want specific. What does SMART stand for? You remember this better than I do. But they want objective and measurable goals are the most important thing. Is objective and measurable. Same going back to karate. A lot of people confuse uniformity with success. And everyone looking the same does not mean everyone fights well. Those biomechanics are good. So we want to teach them a 7-step wrist lock, because that way we have 7 things we can check off whether they did it right. It's not about whether they're going to survive a fight. It's not about whether they're going to do the job. It's about whether, if you think this person needs to be fired, you can't be sued over that. And lawsuits are driving way more of our policy. The feds want to outlaw neck restraints because of George Floyd, despite the fact that a neck restraint wasn't used.
Right.
They want to outlaw some stuff, and the cutting off the blood to the brain is the only thing that works on excited delirium, or really crazy people that doesn't do permanent injury.
Yeah.
They're going to get more people shot because they're taking away tools because of political pressure and because of lawsuits. So, um, so I think the training is terrible because they want it to be rote and prescriptive, because rote and prescriptive is easy to judge. There's another balance with it because they are getting more and better into scenario training, which is the counterbalance to that. Um, but they have to be comfortable with free flow. So the two things are the training that I've seen lately is way too rote. I was in Sweden a while ago and going over some of their training, and we were talking about incorporating some of my stuff, but they said that they can incorporate into the self-defense because in Sweden, they allow outside influences into basically survival level training. Someone's trying to kill you, you can do anything you want. But for handcuffing, um, no matter the level of resistance, they had to go strictly by the book. And some of the body mechanics in their book were not good. There's literally one where they could increase the efficiency just by moving the hand 4 inches to the side. They would increase the leverage by that much, but they weren't allowed to because that's not what was in the book.
It's amazing.
So bureaucracy is death, and this is one of the in law enforcement. You are there to deal with the times where the normal rules aren't working or don't apply. So try to write rules for the times when the rules aren't working is doomed. Um, it's you have to have so you have to have a core ethic. You have to have core principles. You have to have this is the right thing, this is the wrong thing on this scale, not a good bad, because then you get people thinking you should shoot guns out of people's hands. It's
Yeah, it's just amazing some of the
yeah,
comments that have come out of people. You
yeah.
know, it was interesting. I one of my favorite things to do when I train law enforcement is I play the LA Sheriff's 1960 film on baton training, and just how straightforward and very specific areas of the human body. They show scenarios coming in where the perp is injured. One scenario they show is where they tries to go for the officer's gun. He ends up breaking the wrist with the baton. Very, very, good use of it. Affects the arrest and gets in. Today, that would have been, basically all they can do is they can go to the gun and shoot and do that. And I remember my great uncles were Boston cops, and their big thing, they used to laugh when a guy would pull a knife because they felt so confident with their baton, they just break wrists and go in. And we somehow lost the idea that somehow like injury that allows an effective arrest and the person to recover is somehow a bad thing. It's more preferable literally to use deadly force right away. And a lot of these officers, they would rather go to deadly force because they have not been given any training where they would feel confident, with their other tools.
Yeah, and training is not going to be enough. One of the back in the old days, and this was way before my time, they wanted big farm boys. They wanted kids that played football in high school that were, and everyone was expected to have a little bit of fist fighting experience. That was an expectation, and that is a base to build on and add skills to. Now, again, bureaucracy, they want everyone squeaky clean. They want people that can pass a civil service examination, and they're civil servants, but policing is not a civil service job. It's a lot more like a calling. If you don't have that kind of calling attitude, you're going to suck at it, or you're going to be so busy covering your own ass, you'll never get anything done. The one of the classes that I wanted to put together, I would, and I asked Greg Ellifritz if he would, and he goes, "We're totally the wrong people." But I would love to do a class on, not that I could or I'm qualified, on political survival for tactical officers, because they all need that. The guys that are best at that part of the job tend to be the worst at navigating a bureaucracy.
You touched on an area that I think really needs a lot more, because I talked to a lot of DAs and people. What you talked about, your report writing,
Yeah.
is so important in that, learning to tell the story and learning to say why you did what you did is so important, and very few, my wife talks about that all the time. Very few guys know how to correctly write something down in that manner. They've not been taught that way, to how to effectively communicate why they did what they did, in that. And I think that's a skill set that just is so underutilized.
It's here, and it's culturally. I always thought it was funny because I had guys that I could sit there. Oh shit, we got one going off, and 4D was our extreme mental ward, and he's finger painting and covering himself with his own shit. So we got to get a blanket thrown over him and drag him to the shower and force him to do a shower. I would get volunteers for that. Okay. And that's like the ickiest job.
Right.
The grossest type of fight you're ever going to have is fighting with someone covered with shit.
Oh yeah.
And then we get it all done and get him to a new cell while the trustees were cleaning out that cell. And it's like, all right, time to write reports. It's like, oh, so they're willing to get into this fight with the guy covered with shit, but they don't want to write about it.
Right. They're actually intimidated to write about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And and again, that's probably part of the way we teach it. But circling back, this whole thing is we're recruiting kids that have never been physical. We're getting them a job which can be physical, and also because they've never had to deal with the physical, they don't have the social skills to prevent the physical, which is something else you don't learn from Facebook. And then we're putting through a training system where the training system is about being consistent, not about being good. We're trying to get them all the same, even though they're all different, or at least be able to pass the test the same instead of do well. We haven't, our metrics are off on that. And then we throw them into an FTO program, and the FTO program can generally be good, except most of the best officers refuse to be FTOs because they don't want to drag around a rookie. The people that want to be FTOs tend to be the ones that can't get any respect from their peers. So they're trying to impress someone who doesn't know better. So most of the people, in my experience, that volunteer to be FTOs or volunteer to be academy trainers are some of the worst that we have.
See, and that you've touched on something that is amazing. One thing I will say is my time in when I was going through BUD/S, before I blew my ears and everything, and then I was at the command after and intel, the whole thing. The one thing I really respected back then, and I have no idea if they do it now. Of course, now they've got way more experience, real experiences out there. But during that time, it was the tier 1 operators. Mm-hmm. After they cycled out, before they went somewhere else, the deal was, no, you went to BUD/S. And they had at least 1 to 2 tier 1 operators in every phase, to give the most current information, the most current, background, testing all the methods that are being taught. And they were constantly improving. This is all pre sandbox. And I was so impressed by that, by some of the people that we had at the time were our best people that were coming through, but they had to physically do that. And the same thing that I found in the law enforcement academy, that I'm seeing with, some of the people I'm there. If you don't put your best people in to training and give them an incentive, and the incentive would be after, hey, you have your pick of where you want to go after you do the academy, and I don't understand why organizations constantly let these weak individuals or these soured individuals train your most eager new people who are they just want to learn, they want to do the right job, and you're putting in this substandard instructor that is setting them off on a bad foot right away. I see too much of that.
Yeah, your FTOs are going to be the biggest influence on how you turn out. Yeah. And if you've got good ones, you're going to be good. One of my friends who up in Minnesota, he's an extraordinary man. I really like him. Good cop. I've never been arrested by him, so I can't tell for sure. But he said that the absolute difference, if he'd been assigned to the day shift instead of the night shift, he would have been a shitty, lazy, ass covering cop, because that's what he would have had to model.
Yeah.
But he got assigned to the active shift with guys that took care of each other. And so that's what he learned was basic policing.
Yeah, I see so many senior leadership in a lot of these agencies that it's almost dismissed. It's weird.
In mine, I had before I started, it was kind of weird, but My first couple years there, I had a year and 10 months in when they had the first sergeant's test, and you were required to have a minimum of 2 years. Okay, that's not nearly enough. It's just flat out not enough. But I was talking to one of our chief deputies, um, and he said that, yeah, if you didn't take it within your 2 years and try to get promoted every 2 years, um, then he didn't think that you were smart enough or ambitious enough to go up the chain of command. So our entire leadership had about, on average, 2 years doing the actual job they were supervising. They were some of the least experienced officers we had were running the show. And that kind of culture, and we wound up having two entirely separate cultures. The line staff and the administrative staff were almost different worlds. Could barely communicate, couldn't see eye to eye on anything because they didn't know each other.
That's, I'm hoping, I'm always, all you can do is hope. I'm hoping that what happened this last year, that a lot of agencies are going to rethink, what they're doing. And I don't know that I've seen a couple of hopeful signs, but I think we're probably going to see more of the weakness and for safety reasons. I mean, there's no upside to aggressively doing the job, and I mean, positively, aggressively doing the job. If anything, you're penalized for it. And I think we're going to see as society the repercussions of that. And I think you're probably going to see, a lot of what you saw in the 70s is you'll probably see some vigilantism. You'll probably see things like that because there'll be a vacuum. Mm-hmm. And, it's just unfortunate because good training produces, like you said, I mean, you give a perfect example with your friend. He was on the right shift, and he learned the right things, and it stuck with him the rest of his career. Yeah. And I just don't see people being vigilant enough in these agencies to ensure that they've got the best people out there training your new recruits.
Yeah. Most of our managers, well, and side effect of being, and I don't know how much this is the state that I worked in, but you couldn't order people to be FTOs. They had to volunteer. Right. So you could try to influence them. You could try to talk them into it. But when you get in a position where you can't order people to do stuff, you can't make people, and it's volunteers tended to not be the best guys.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and that's the unfortunate truth. Hey, I got one more question before we go. Could you just explain to everybody? I'm not even going to say the name. Could you explain? I know the background of it, but I love the name of your training and the inspiration. I don't think the one thing that's really interesting is you're extremely well read, and it shows in your writing and your references and everything. It's another reason I'd encourage people. Not only is the information gold, it's your writing style. It's fun to read. It really is, and you incorporate a lot of really well thought out and classic information. But could you explain the background on the name?
Huron Training. So Chiron was the centaur who trained all of the Greek heroes. He trained Hercules. He trained not Aeneas, but the Argonauts.
Yes.
Almost all of them were trained by Chiron, and he taught them how to read, how to reason, how to fight, how to heal. So he was the only good centaur in Greek mythology. And the Greek writing at the bottom of the seal on the logo, I can't pronounce, I'm not going to try, but it's the ancient Greek for "We train heroes."
And that to me is just so like, that's just a mission statement right there. And that's really cool. And I wanted people to hear that because I just think, you put a lot of thought into everything that you do. And in this industry, that's rare. There are a lot of good people. Don't get me wrong. There are good people in here, but you get that rare individual like yourself that really has put real thought into how to think about these subjects, the unvarnished, truth, whether you like it or not. This is what I'm going to share with you. And I personally, I really appreciated it. And I'm happy that, I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of questions, from this for follow-up. And if you're open to a follow-up, I think it'd be great. but I really enjoyed this first true interview that you and I have done.
Yeah.
And anything you want. Now they're going to know all the contact information, all that stuff's going to be shared on that. But is there anything closing that you'd like people to think, just in the current state that we're in right now, where we're at, just to somebody who's looking, they haven't taken the plunge yet, they haven't gone combat sport, martial art, self-defense yet. What would you say, like, if it was somebody you really cared about, what would you say the first step is for them to look at?
The first step is decide how much time you have and how much a part of your life you want this to be. Because if this is something that you think you need it quick, then go to Tim, come to me, take some craft classes. If this is more lifestyle thing, then start something with, I like judo, obviously.
Mhm.
It's a good foundation. I've never seen anyone have to unlearn their judo habits to take something else. It's so start at close range, then add a striking art to it, then add something that combines them.
Judo is so great because I think what the innate fear most people have is being grabbed, being thrown to the ground, and you immediately get comfortable with that. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just, if you learn the basics of judo, it sticks with you the rest of your life. And that's the first thing. Like, all my kids, I want them to get over. I'm having them do BJJ just because we don't have a judo option here. But I want people to be comfortable first with that aspect of it and get over that fear. So I think it's great. But your training, your training methodology and how you think about it, I think is really worthwhile. And if people haven't experienced, I would tell everybody, start with Meditations on Violence. You have many other things. Also, your website, when people go to the website, your recommended reading list is probably one of the best ones I've seen in the industry. I've seen other people do them. Yours was fantastic. I hadn't looked at it in a while. And when I was, getting ready for the interview, I re-looked at it. And if for no other reason, people should go to that that part of your website, and they just have a wealth of knowledge if they just went right through those books, because they're all there. There's no fat in any of those recommendations.
I feel bad. I haven't read your book yet. So
You're not missing anything.
I bet I am.
Yeah, there. No, I appreciate that, but again, listen, I'm very much in alignment with a lot of, we do things differently, but I'm very much in alignment with the way you look at the subject. And I think, honestly, I tell people this all the time. If you're only going to read one book, I really think yours is the book. And I'm not saying that because I'm talking to you. I say this, I haven't talked to you in years, and
Yeah. It's
I've
been a long time.
I've given your book away more than any other book when it comes to this, because I really think if people wrap their head around it, it's going to take away all the illusions. It's going to give them a really good foundation of what the differentiation is between what they think they're training for and what they're really, what reality is, and a very realistic expectation of what you can achieve. And you did it all in one book, and that's really that's really cool. I enjoy that, but I look forward to anything future. Anything else you'd like to close out for anybody?
And this is going off what I thought you were going to ask last time, is monitor your inputs. There's a lot of fear mongering around right now. People want you afraid because scared people are easy to manipulate and easy to control. So don't give in to the fear. Do the research. Things are not as bad as people are telling you they are, but they could get way bad.
So, just eliminating social media will do a huge
Yeah.
service to you. Change your mind.
Yeah.
No, that's outstanding. Well, hey, Rory, thank you so much for your time, and look forward to catching up in the very near future.
Cool, Tim. It's been a while. So
It has been a while, man. Man, I really enjoyed catching back up with Rory and doing that interview. The total interview is 2 hours. I broke it up into 4 parts for you guys. And really, there's just so much there to unpack and to really enjoy. Like I said, I think Rory's one of the unique thinkers in the industry. He very much puts it out as he sees it. He doesn't really try to sugarcoat anything, and doesn't really try to convince you. He just says, hey, this is what I've observed. This is the material as I see it to date. This is where I've taken it. And often, I'm of the same mind that, you get this information and you make it your own. you're not going to just have my stuff up on your shelf. I hope you're going to have a variety of good stuff up on your shelf, and absolutely Rory's products need to be there if they aren't already there. So again, please make your comments. I would definitely do a follow-up with Rory based off of some of the comments and some of the suggestions people have had so far. But if there's anything that you would like covered in the future, please let us know. Anybody you'd like me to interview, make your suggestions, because a couple of these interviews have been driven by the viewers' requests. So again, go to Chiron Training, check out Rory's stuff. Everything's in the show notes. And until next time, please stay safe.